One half of the growth of Christianity in Thailand is directly responsible to this village getting the gospel in 1986. That is incredible. Welcome to our next episode. In this one, we're going to be talking more about the country of Thailand. And we'll be discussing the fact that there are more elephants in Thailand than there are Christians. Now, when I first went to Thailand in 1986, there were not many Christians there. Baptist missionaries first arrived in 1833 as a result of Adoniram Judson's ministry just across the border in Burma. 7 years later, Presbyterian missionaries arrived, as well as a small contingent of Chinese missionaries. Following them were Burmese missionaries from the Karen tribe. Their tribe had been largely converted by associates of Judson, and they were eager to share their new faith with their tribal cousins in Thailand. 65 years later, in 1868, the first Western-style church was organized in the northern city of Chiang Mai. This is the seat of the Hill tribe region, and a year later, the first two Thai Christians were martyred there. Chiang Mai is located far in the north, as you can see here, and not too far away from it is Burma, Laos, North Vietnam, and even China is only 60 miles. Most of the missionaries who live in Thailand live up here in the city of Chiang Mai. Now, at the time I went to Thailand in 1986, Chiang Mai had a population of 600,000 people. Bangkok, down in the south, the capital, had a population of 13 million people. Now, where do you think most missionaries would go? You're wrong. 80% of the missionaries were living up here in Chiang Mai, where less than 1 million people were. Why? Because it's perceived to be the coolest city in the country. Bangkok is like walking into an oven that's been turned on high and waiting for you to get there. Chiang Mai is like standing next to that oven with the door open. It's still hot, but not as hot as Bangkok, so it attracts a lot of people. However, there's another reason missionaries were attracted to go there. That's because this area is the center of the tribal ministries that are there. However, there are, I think, 69 tribal groups living in Thailand. But most of those who are, quote, working with the tribal people never even went out to a village. They were just bureaucratic missionaries pushing paper for their denominations back home. They were not actually out in the villages. I met one gentleman who was the head of a Thai tribal outreach for his denomination. He had been there for about 14 years, and he told me that in that time, he had never one time spent a night in a tribal village. How can you minister to these people and get to know them if you don't spend time with them? Well, this is where most of them live. And when I was working there in Thailand, I was working primarily in that area right there between Chiang Mai and Chiang Rai. In 1986, the Christian population in Thailand was estimated to be 0.01% of the people. That's virtually none. It was openly stated at that time that there were more elephants in Thailand than there were Christians. That's how seldom it was to meet a believer at that time. Most believers were and still are tribal, except for a significant percentage of the medical professionals who had been heavily involved in evangelizing when they would come to work with the Thai doctors and train them on new methods and new techniques. Now, in the year 2000 census, 0.7% of the total population, some 60 million people, were registered as being Christians. So that's quite a jump from 0.01 to 0.7. But by 2020, that number had grown to as much as 2% of the population. That equates to nearly 1,200,000 conversions in 3 decades. With only 20 independent Baptist missionaries serving there, and a relative few from other groups, this growth that was experienced in Thailand during that time was a direct result of the work of the national church and their national and tribal preachers who rose up to carry the gospel to the rest of their country. Now, still today, 57% of all the Christians in Thailand live in the northern provinces. This is, as we talked about, the tribal areas of Thailand. Yes, they live over here too. They live here. You have them down here. But this is known as the tribal area. In fact, it's typically known as the hill tribes because it's very, very mountainous. Or you might call them, that's the hillbillies of Southeast Asia. 57% of all the Christians living in Thailand live up here. Now, 51% of all Christians live in just 3 predominantly tribal provinces, where the Baptists started evangelizing 185 years ago. In most countries, such as in Mexico, Brazil, Peru, missionaries overlook the tribal people in their efforts to reach the citizens. Thailand is an enigma, where we have overlooked the citizens to reach the tribal groups. Now, in late 1986, I was privileged to be the first messenger to the Akha tribe. Even though 20 years earlier, a national evangelist from China had led 5 of their men to Christ, he left them without any discipleship, any training, or any church. 10 years after planting the first church with them in 1986, the Thai branch of the Akha tribe, which numbered 600,000, were fully evangelized with over 90% professing faith in Christ. That means of the 1,200,000 people growth in Christianity from 2000 to 2020, over half of it came from the efforts of the Akha converts reaching their own Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria. By the way, these are some of the original Akha converts. If you've heard me tell the story about Zion Hill and where I first met the Akha, and they thought I was an albino monkey, and we ended up planting a church there, having a little Bible institute there. These are how all the ladies were dressed when I first went into their village. And their costumes mean different things. This picture was taken in 2016 when we went back for our 30th anniversary of starting our ministry. This is where Final Frontiers began. On this spot is where I ate the dogs and ate the mushrooms and preached the gospel to people who had never heard it before. But now, of the 600,000 members of their tribe in Thailand, 540,000 of them have professed faith in Christ. They've also won their fellow Akha people in Laos and Burma and in China and as far away as North Vietnam. They also minister to the Lahu tribe, the Lisu tribe, and all the other tribes in the area. So clearly, 1/2 of the growth of Christianity in Thailand is directly responsible to this village getting the gospel in 1986. That is incredible. I like to go back and visit when I can. On this trip, I took my son and his family. Here's 2 of my granddaughters riding an elephant. Now I'll tell you a little bit something interesting about that. I was there a few years before that with some American pastors who wanted to see our work there. And so I wanted to take them and let them ride an elephant. I bought the ticket for the 2 of them, and then there were 2 more of us that needed to have a ticket. And so I said, I need a ticket for me and my friend. And the lady looked at me and said, no. You have to ride by yourself. I said, well, why do I have to ride by myself? And she said, because you're so big. The elephant can't carry 2 men with you on it. Well, I rode an elephant by myself, but at least my granddaughters got to ride it together. Now, back to where we were. The good news is this. There are now more Christians in Thailand than there are elephants.
Were you aware that Adoniram Judson have produced so much fruit that remained? I spent well over a year of my life in Thailand, but only saw 2 elephants. Since there were more elephants than Christians at that time, that means as I walk the streets of the country, it's likely I never passed a Christian. Why do you suppose the Thai converts so slowly and the tribal peoples more rapidly? The answer, many of their tribal legends parallel the stories of the Bible. They say they once had a book about the Creator, but their forefathers lost it. They have been waiting for it to return, and now it has.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode in our Understanding the Great Commission series. If you'd like a copy of the book, it's available in paperback, audiobook, and digital download. Just click the link in the description below. Thank you for watching.